And it's now my deep pleasure to invite Kiran Mazumdar, who is the chair of the IIM board, to come and address the gathering.
Thanks, sir. Really sorry I'm sort of suffering from a very bad case of flu that I contracted when I was on an overseas trip, so please forgive me if I have a very creamy voice. First and foremost, I'm sure you must have heard a very good presentation from Revati. BPAC has been spending a lot of time on coming out with waste management formulae, policies, guidelines, whatever you might call it. And I think it's very important that we have this opportunity of engaging with all of you here, because I think IIM can play a very, very important role as all the participants here in terms of helping us evolve comprehensive guidelines for how to deal with solid waste. Now, I always believe that when you look at cities around the world, the two metrics that really stand out of great cities is cleanliness and orderliness. And when you look at cleanliness, it's really about how they manage their garbage, how they deal with their street cleanliness, how they deal with general cleanliness, which really starts from their own communities. Now, in Bangalore, I know, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I can tell you Bangalore was a very clean and orderly city. And I know growing up that, I never saw people littering on the streets. We used to have, dust bins, we used to have garbage bins. I know that Bangalore roads were sort of almost washed every morning. And we had people sweeping the pavements. And it was such a spick and span city in those days, for whoever remembers those days. And then, of course, I must also confess that those were the days when our population was less than 1 million people. And we had very, very few cars on the road. And today, of course, the times have changed. We've got a population which is more than tenfold greater than what it used to be. And I think the density of traffic is something which we could never ever have imagined, because those were the days where you had to wait for 6 months to book a car and get your car after maybe 6 months if you're lucky, if not for a year, and you could only get an Ambassador or a Fiat. Today you know that our streets are just clogged with traffic. So I think when you talk about orderliness, it's also about how we manage our traffic, how pedestrians use footpaths. We don't even have footpaths these days. And those are the kind of things that we really need to look at. So coming back to sort of cleanliness and solid waste management, I think what we've been advocating a lot is about segregation. Why do we need segregation? First and foremost, the first thing I do when I move around the world is to see how great cities manage their garbage. And one thing I've seen in big cities is that every city, at every almost street or a main street, they have garbage dumps. They have garbage dumps for organic waste, inorganic waste, and for what is also called as hazardous waste. And this is something I've seen around the city, where I think we also need to adopt these kind of mechanisms, because, unless we get people to basically use these garbage dumps to actually segregate the waste, I think we will not be able to do a great job. And then, of course, what they do is to have these garbage dumps, which actually then fit into garbage trucks that actually deal with the garbage in a very proficient way. I know that when we were talking to Minister George the other day, he actually mentioned that they were going to try out these particular mechanized garbage dumps and garbage trucks to basically start getting this kind of cleanliness aspect and segregation aspect into the city. So we are going to work with the government and the ministry to see how we can basically utilize what other cities have done very successfully. On the other hand, I think it also is very important for us to understand how do we manage garbage within wards. And we all know that when you look at organic waste, that is one segregated waste which you can very easily handle at a ward level. This is something I think we all have to look at and see, can we not get organic waste and handle it in a ward, either through by generating biogas out of the particular organic waste or composting. I think composting is something that we would advocate for a large amount of vegetable waste, garden waste, which can easily be sort of converted into compost and used very successfully within the wards by the people who are composting it as well. We are trying out this composting exercise at many of the marketplaces, for instance. You know, the city market, Madiwala market, all these areas which generate a huge amount of vegetable waste. Right now it's an ugly sight, but this is very rich composting material which we are going to try and create large composting units near these particular markets so that we can actually deal with it locally. We also know that when you then look at the inorganic waste, this is something that really needs to be taken to certain particular garbage management zones or hubs where they can be segregated, separated and recycled. So these are basically mechanisms that we have evolved over time. But I think overall we need to really come out with very, very strong guidelines and frameworks about how we basically adopt best practices. And these best practices are known the world over. I think BPAC has basically taken and borrowed many of these best practices. And I think the important aspect is tracking waste. How do we track waste? You know, right now we're talking, when we talk about waste, one of the biggest problems we have in the city is debris. Debris is a huge waste disposal problem. Construction debris is just being deposited and dumped anywhere and everywhere in the city. And this is causing huge problems. Whether it is in blocking drains, stormwater drains, whatever you call it, it's not at all something that we can accept. This is something that we have talked about for a long time with the government saying, listen, please have a debris disposal policy. And there have been attempts to have debris disposal policies. They have identified certain quarries where you can actually dump these debris and then recycle the debris into recycled building materials and so on and so forth. But this policy has just not gone anywhere. We still see a lot of debris. There is no penalty, there is no rules and regulations for construction companies to how to deal with debris. And yet every city in the world has a debris disposal policy. This is something which we must also adopt. So debris is a very important area. Organic waste is a very important area for us to segregate. And then we also have to deal with inorganic waste in terms of how do we recycle, compact, track, and make sure that we keep our city clean. So I think we're really looking forward to engaging with all of you who are willing to come to evolve and formulate a waste disposal management system that the whole city can then basically adopt. And this is where I think we have been spending many meetings, I would say, trying to see how do we effectively get citizens to really play an important role in keeping our cities clean. I think cleanliness in a city is going to be extremely important. We talk about smart cities. Smart cities, I think, start with clean cities. And those clean cities have to be about what, Revati just talked about. The Spotter app. every citizen must really be on the watch for where are we, having these dirty spots, these dark spots. Where can we clean up? I would say that yes, in Bangalore we've had a lot of great initiatives. The Ugly Indians, I know BPAC itself has had many cleanup drives, and many corporates have also had a number of cleanup drives. These are all very important initiatives. But at the end of the day, I think every one of us must want our city to be clean. And if it can start with us, and if each one of us can be responsible enough to say that, okay, I'm going to really take garbage seriously. I'm going to make sure that I segregate my garbage. I'm going to make sure that, if there are garbage dumps which allow me to go and dump my garbage in a systematically, a seamless way, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to just throw it on the street. It starts with us. And I think this is what it's all about. So I would just like to say that this is an important workshop. I'm sure there is much to discuss. And I'm glad that it's being held right here, because I think institutes like this need to actually roll up their sleeves and really lend a very important, able hand at really coming up with policies, frameworks, guidelines, so that the government actually will be able to very effectively and optimally address this very challenging problem of garbage management. So thanks a lot.